Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Milrad. I am the founder of Movie Karma. We created this podcast, Rewriting Hollywood, to focus on issues of equity, inclusion, representation, as well as diversity in Hollywood. And we also take a look often, I'm sure as many of you know, at the power of story to have a social impact and to foster social change in our world. So today I have a really talented guest who's been taking some interesting paths in his own journey. His name is Justin Cunningham. He's an Arkansas native, graduate of Julliard. He's also starring in the new comedy on Peacock called Grand Crew, which I had a chance to check out. It's fantastic. And you may know him from his work in When They See Us by the great Ava DuVernay a few years back. So really excited to talk to Justin today about his journey in Hollywood and before. Justin, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's dive in. You have a kind of a pretty neat journey so far already. You've, as I said, you're from Arkansas, you graduated from Julliard, you are a TV and theater actor, starring a couple exciting new projects in Grand Crew. Let's start at the beginning though. Justin, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What was it like growing up where you did, and what made you want to think about acting as a career?
I'm from Arkansas. I'm from Central Arkansas, a town called Atkins, Arkansas. It's a farm town. So I grew up on a farm. We grew chickens and hogs commercially for Tyson Foods. At one period of time, we had the largest commercial farm in Polk County, which was the county that we were in. Wow. And we were actually like one of the only sort of Black farming families. But my family had been there for generations, ever since Reconstruction, actually. I kind of traced it back before I moved to New York. And so we've been working that land for over 100 years, and I could have taken that path. I probably still could if I wanted to continue to, or like go back home and get a piece of land and to farm and do that. But I think from working on the farm and with my older brothers as well, we all grew up having to work like daily, all day. Like my father, who worked for Firestone Tire, he was a forklift driver, and he would work at night, and then he'd get home maybe around 6 or 7. He'd sleep for 2 hours, and then he'd work all day on the farm. And we would basically get home from school around 2 or 3, and then we work with him all the way into the night, and then he'd sleep for another couple of hours, then go back to work. So he slept maybe 4 hours out of every 2 days. Wow. But we worked, it was like we worked like we breathed, like we breathe. We just worked all the time. And so that created a lot in me and in my brothers as well, some type of outlet. And for me, it was just creating characters, or like kind of going through stories in my head while I'm sitting on a tractor in 96-degree heat, for 12 hours. You start to get a little bit delusional. So you have to like kind of entertain yourself. And that's kind of where I developed it. I was going through a kind of a mania on a tractor. And so but there wasn't a lot of outlets for artists in Arkansas or in that area. And I didn't really get into theater until I went to the University of Arkansas, and where I was there for 6 years. I was 2 years a business major, and then just hated it, and then decided to take a theater class. And that's where I found my people. That's where I found what I think I was meant to do. And so, but yeah, from there, from growing up on the farm and doing all that strange work, it kind of developed in me a sense of creativity to entertain myself and my brothers and everything. And so that's where I kind of took off. And then I was in Arkansas working as an actor, and also as I was producing musical improv as well. And old professor said that Julliard was starting a master's program and that I should apply. And so I spent all the money I had. It was the only school I applied to, and I flew out to New York. Never been to New York. Got in on my first try. So, and then that went on through there.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, talk about kind of a journey. I have so many questions about that. I actually, so in law school, I went down to Crittenden County, where that is, and that part of part of the world and did civil rights work, and actually met some folks in the Black farming community, and I know there's a lot of really troubled history there, and a desire of Black farmers in particular to regain a lot of the land that was taken from them. So I'm curious to just start there in terms of, like, I imagine, as you alluded to, that's a point of pride for your family. And did you feel a degree of pressure to, continue that legacy? Because that's something that's really powerful.
Yeah, I did, and I still do, because I guess for someone like me who's, well, I guess for a lot of people in the South, where there's like a legacy of land. Land is a very important thing to a lot of people, because that's sort of like, especially for Black culture and in the South, when you own a piece of land, that's sort of heritage, and it gets passed down. And like I said, we've been on that land for the last 100 years and working that land, and I know it like the back of my hand. And so, all the younger kids now, like about my age, that come up and basically in like the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, have all moved away and done their own thing. And so now the old people are still there, and they kind of still want us to come back and want to keep that land and everything that we work for in the family. So yeah, there is that strange pull to stick to your roots and stay grounded where you are. But that was something that was very important to me when I did move to New York. Was I wanted to gain a larger understanding of where I come from, and I learned a lot of different things about that heritage, specifically in that area. It was a very segregated area, which is why my family lives in the area that it lives in. It's like a mostly Black neighborhood, but I went to an all-white school in the town of Atkins, and in that Black neighborhood is mostly Black owned, and then in the Atkins realm, the white neighborhood is mostly white owned. So it's still like the history of the area still kind of exists and like persists. So yeah, there is that weird heritage and pull to like sort of stay tied to it in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel like, Justin, that you do that in your work? Because I imagine that informs your art too, that you have that sense of grounding and history and pride about where you're from and your family. Like, how does that play out? And what does your family think about too, what you've been
yeah, I mean, whenever I approach it, in my career so far in New York, I've actually done a lot of things, a lot of shows about Arkansas, strangely enough. I did a musical off Broadway called Little Rock, where I played one of the Little Rock Nine and was able to meet some of the Little Rock Nine. And that was really interesting. Then I did a musical called Broadbend, Arkansas, which was a fictional place in Arkansas, but I had based it on the town of Athens. Yeah, in my career, strangely enough, I've been sort of, a lot of my work's been sort of based around that. But yeah, it always, what's strange about, well, not really strange about Grand Crew or about my career as a Black actor, is that sometimes, or a lot of the time, when I'm auditioning for shows or when I'm going out for something, it's usually seen through a Black lens, or I'm receiving characters that where the main focus, I guess, of building that character is through their perspective of being a Black man. So I'm going out for, prisoners, prison guards, sometimes policemen, things like that. But with Grand Crew, it was really unique script, because even though it's an all Black cast and it's telling stories through a Black perspective, it humanizes me in a way that I don't feel like I have to look through that lens so much anymore, that I actually am able to start exploring who I am. And that's sort of what the show focuses on, is breaking down those types of stereotypes, or those monolithic things of the Black experience. And we actually get to see people who are weird and goofy and nerdy and just do really fun things. And I think that's what's really important about this show. But as in terms of my career, that's always sort of been the lens in which I've gone through it, whether it be something historical about the Black experience or Shakespeare. But
yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, let's talk a little about Grand Crew. I had a chance to check it out. It's really funny. It's a really it's like you said, it's kind of quirky. It's about basically just a bunch of friends, a crew that hangs out and has their different bar they're trying to find. And all the adventures and shenanigans that each of the characters and starts, sort of goes through relationships and everything. I think folks should check it out if they haven't. It's really neat. But I want to talk to you about the aspect that you raise of kind of where your identity intersects with the roles that you've been offered or that you take on. Whereas this role, as you said, it seems very well-rounded and dimensional, multi-dimensional, but yet we have that kind of narrator, in the show, kind of the older gentleman, this older Black gentleman who's basically saying, like, particularly like Black men are like, we're full people. We have all these sides to us that we don't get to see on screen. So it's almost like, we get to see folks just be people, but we also there's still that lens of, hey, society has not shown us fully. Like, how do you think about that balance? Almost, it feels like to me of, hey, race is definitely a part of this because of systemic racism, all the crap the society is given to us, but it's also just a show about people and like living their lives.
Right. It's very hard to describe this show in that sense, because when you see an all Black cast, it immediately gets labeled as a Black show.
Right.
And so for some reason, that's what shows with all Black cast get labeled as. And you look at a show like Friends, you don't necessarily think an all white cast. I mean, I do, because it is an all white cast.
Right.
Or you look at the show Succession, you don't immediately think all white cast. You think of like a really dysfunctional family. But when it's a show about people of color, it gets labeled as such, and it gets put that specificity on it, and then for us, the whole team, the creative crew, the actors and everything, we get that sort of, not necessarily a burden, but it feels like a sort of weight put on it that we have to speak through that lens, and that's the expectation that people have of that show. And then when they watch the show, sometimes people may be confused, like, oh, I thought this was a Black show, but it is that, and that's very, like you said, it's kind of hard to understand how to break down how to see people of color as not just a Black show or a Black experience, that we are human beings and we experience different things, just like Garrett Morris, the narrator in the show, says in the pilot episode, and that there's different layers to us, and that isn't the only mode in which we live in this society. We are people that love wine, that love to hang out with friends. My character Wyatt is extremely competitive with his wife, and he's deeply in love with his wife. We get to explore a relationship, a Black relationship with a married man and woman, and how they interact with friends, and without the lens of being Black. And I think that's a show that's a narrative that is necessary for us going forward, especially in network television, because network television doesn't have a lot of all Black casts. And so for this show, I think it's kind of daring a little bit to try to step away from that sort of label and narrative and go about it in a different way.
Yeah, it is daring. I mean, it's, maybe hopefully 50, 100 years from now, maybe viewed differently, like, oh, it's another show that's great, entertaining, but there's not this sort of, like you said, that added burden in a way of, this show has to work, or we only get a few shots or bites at the apple because of discrimination, systemic oppression that still exists. So I'm curious, like, what has the response been so far from people in your own network, people that reach out to you in terms of seeing the show? Because it is, like you said, something we don't always see, just to see, Black folks hanging out and like just in living their lives. And we don't get to see those full body characters. Often it's like the one or two people of color or the one LGBTQ, et cetera.
Yeah. I think people from whoever's been reaching out to me, I sort of stay off social media, or I'm trying to, at least so much. So I'm kind of disconnecting myself from some things, but the response to it that I've received has all been positive. Of course, there's always, the negative responses from here and there, but I think a lot of that comes from a lack of understanding of what the show is trying to do, what we're trying to say, and what the message is. And I think people yeah, like they're putting this unconscious bias on something that they believe has to have a message because it has an all Black cast. And so the cast and the show, it has to be saying something about the Black experience. And like, it's just, I think the show is there to have fun, to make people laugh, to show a side of Black joy, of Black experiences that show that we're more than just one thing. But the response to me that I've seen is all been positive. I get messages daily from people who've been really enjoying the show, and I have a group text with the cast, and they're always sharing what people have said about the show, and like when people have been saying to them in person. But the responses has been really good, and my family back home has been watching it, and of course they all love it, and I think it's very necessary and important for people in the Midwest to see a show that's of people of color, and showing people in that different light. Because I mean, for me growing up in Arkansas, I didn't really have that. I didn't really have that outlet to see myself represented on television, because I mean, I didn't know that I could be doing this. I didn't know I could be doing this when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, all the time that I was in Arkansas. I just thought that my life was there, and that I would just have to be farming, and that my story, my time, my person couldn't be elevated in a different way because I didn't see it anywhere. So I think it's specifically important that it's out there, especially in the Midwest and places like where I come from.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what representation comes down to, right? It's like how do we see people, and how do young people see a place for them on screen? And it sounds like that's not something that you had the experience of doing when you were younger. Did you have or do you have mentors now that have supported you or given you guidance? And if so, I'm curious, like in what ways have they helped shape your career, do you think?
Yeah, I've had a few. I'll start with, I guess, one of my Julliard professors, Mr. Richard Feldman. Mm-hmm. He's one of the best teachers, best people I've ever met. He gave me a lot of strength and took a lot of time with me when I was going through a hard time at Julliard. If you ask anybody about their Julliard experience, especially actors, they kind of pause for a moment and then give you an answer, mm-hmm. because it's a very unique experience, and you go through something when you're there, but you still come out on the other side, and you do change. And so Richard Feldman, who's one of the professors there, is one of my great mentors, and he always taught me how to find a character or lead my life with curiosity, which is the main I think lesson that I learned from him, was to always be leading with curiosity. That's the most interesting thing to watch, is someone that leads with curiosity. And I always say that Wyatt is someone who leads with curiosity, which is why I wanted Wyatt to have glasses. I wanted him to have glasses to magnify how he sees things. And I offhandedly, when I was in Julliard, met Stephen McKinley Henderson. I'm not sure you know Stephen McKinley Henderson. He's been doing fantastic work now. Yeah, he's a legend. And had him as a masterclass teacher. But I had him as a masterclass teacher my third year. It's a 4-year program, but I had met him my second year, and I had lunch with him because the director of drama at the time, Jim Houghton, who's sadly passed a few years ago, but put me in contact with him. We had lunch, and then I learned, strangely enough, by sitting down with Stephen McKinley Henderson, that his family was also from Arkansas. Oh, wow. And he was from a town called Blackwell, Arkansas, which is the town that my family is at. And so I found that there was sort of distantly kind of relatives, and I was like, that's wild. But he also said a thing that I take with me all the time, and I think it's so strange because Stephen McKinley Henderson has touched so many people that whenever he pops up on a movie screen, like I'm in the theater and he pops up, you hear like an audible gasp from different parts of the theater of people that he's touched personally, and they go, he's there. Oh, it's there. Yeah. But he always says a thing, and I'm going to say it now. He said, whenever you're working on something, don't get it right, get it true. And I was like, okay, all right. Don't get it right, get it true. So that I've always taken that with me. But yeah, I think my main mentor will be Mr. Henderson and Richard Feldman.
Wow, those are good mentors. Some get it right, get it true. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing to live by. In relationships too, and
Yep.
You've also done work on Broadway and King Richard. You've done a lot of incredible theater work. I wonder, like, what how do you? I feel like actors sometimes are forced to like maybe choose in answers. Like, what do you like more? I don't know if that's helpful question, but I wonder, like, how do you use that training and that Julliard training when you are part of something like Grand Crew? And do you have different parts of those types of performances, theater versus TV, film, that you enjoy in different ways?
The main thing I enjoy about TV is the pay.
Yeah,
it just pays so much more.
Yeah.
But the process is a lot different. It's a lot quicker, faster. In a way, you have to prepare a little bit more, a little bit better, because everybody's on a schedule, and when the camera starts rolling, you have to give them something. You have to perform and put it there. So a lot of the onus is on you to do your part. And for me, starting out, I don't have a lot of experience doing film and television. I mean, I did do When They See Us. I did a little small thing on Succession, but they didn't use that footage. Man, whatever. Still got paid though. But I did a few commercials here and there. So my experience on film has been very limited. But through this process of working on Grand Crew, I did learn. I was like, okay, I gotta show up, and all the Julliard stuff I was pulling out the bag of how to prepare, how to clear my body, clear my mind, and get myself as relaxed as possible to try to deliver in the moment right then when they start rolling, so we can get the whole day done. Yeah, that's the main difference. Is like the day is like it's very set out, and you got to hit those marks. So because you don't want to get the schedule behind, and you don't want to be the reason why everybody gets behind. Right. So it's a lot of onus on you. But in a theater sense, it's a lot more relaxed. You get to take your time. You get to learn the lines, and you get to craft something as opposed to just kind of going at it and just trying to hit it with your best shot. So I think for me though, I don't really have a favorite, because you can get into the groove when you're on camera, and then you also get in the groove when you're on stage. And but I do love the process of rehearsal for theater, because it's just you take more time, you get to explore more things, you get to discover more things, and then through the process of doing shows, you get into a run, you're in your like 150th show, and you're finding new things still. And by the time you get to your last show, you find all the new things. And that's something that we all get into, I guess, theater or acting for, is to find different parts of ourselves that we can pull out. I was saying in a different interview, I was talking about how people, when I was back home, they're like, oh, you studied acting, so you know how to like play make believe. And I'm like, well, no, the study of acting is not necessarily learning how to lie on stage. It's learning how to tell the truth. And so for me, whenever I'm getting in front of a camera or getting on stage, it's such a great time to try to explore how to tell my truth. And that's when I feel the most of myself, is when I am playing someone else, strangely enough.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Sometimes we feel safer in art and embodying someone else, so we feel closer to ourselves. It's an interesting conundrum. But I think your point too about just the rehearsal time of theater, and there's a little bit of different practice and just like time horizon. I think that's good for people to remember. I was asked you about When They See Us, because I think that's really neat that you had a chance to be in that as Kevin Richardson. It was also a really powerful project, impactful, relevant. I was wondering if you could just talk about your experience in that project and what it's meant to you even now.
Yeah, it like to this day, I still stay in touch with Kevin Richardson, and I send him a text here and there when he has a birthday or on the holidays and everything. I think pretty much everybody in the cast kind of stays in touch with each other. But that show, that experience was very, it was very surreal. because it was like my first real thing that I did, and it was of that caliber with Ava and with just a stellar cast. And it's very rare for an actor to be a part of a project like that I think is going to be a part of history, and it is the retelling of history. And I feel really lucky and yeah, extremely lucky and privileged to have been a part of that. I was actually, when I auditioned for that, I was doing that musical Little Rock off Broadway, and I was going to the callback with Ava, and I think we were in tech for the show, and I just lied. I was like, I have a dentist appointment, but I was actually going to go do a callback for Ava because I was so excited and just like I needed to get this role. And then, I booked it, and it was such a great learning experience because I had a large learning curve because I was coming from theater, of how to be more subtle, how to tell the story, how to focus in on how to tell the story. Because when you're doing a film like that or a miniseries like that, it's important that you do that specific work, because your work that you're doing is part of a larger story. So in those first 2 episodes where the young guys are doing their stuff, you have to mine back there as well and see what they did in order to make it make sense with what you're doing now. Because you're not just going through your own performance, right. You're going through everyone else's performance leading up to this whole thing. It's a whole story. So I learned that. I was like, it's not just about me in this moment. It's about everyone in this whole experience. And that was like one of the first times where I felt like I'm really a part of something that is way, way, way larger than anything I can possibly comprehend.
Yeah, it's so true. It's such a large. You're part of this tapestry, and you have to find your spot in it and do it justice. What I think you did. One of the last questions we'd like to ask all of our guests, Justin, is around this issue of now a topic of focus in the industry of diversity, equity, inclusion, and we talked a little about it earlier with Grand Crew, and even when they see us was hailed as like a really obviously inclusive project, important project, impactful project. What do you see as the main challenges or even opportunities for the industry as it wrestles with, I would argue, way too late, but at least it's happening, issues of how to be more inclusive and equitable and representative, and how do you see your role in that in terms of the projects you take on and what type of work you do?
Well, I've been learning that the more and more work that I get the opportunity to do, the more and more I want it to speak towards my experience. The more and more I have been a part of shows where I have felt like I was just a diversity hire, where my voice wasn't really valued in the room, just the color of my skin, because it was just necessary to have that for whatever reason. I feel like the next step, like we're awkwardly stumbling forward, I think, but I feel like the next step is not only just to hire and hire Black actors, whether it be theater or film and television, but there has to be inclusion inside the production side. Like we can't just tell the stories of people of color. We have to have people pushing them. We have to have the people behind it. We have to have Black producers. We have to have Black casting directors. I only know of one Black casting director. And then if you're casting a show and you have an all white panel of casting a Black experience, it doesn't feel to me when I walk into those rooms, because I have walked into those rooms, I just don't feel like the representation there is able to see me for who I am, which I think is what Grand Crew does. It's when I got the script for Grand Crew, even though this character was Black, I was doing the scene and I was like, I'm actually able to be myself and then feel seen as myself, and not seen as a Black actor, but seen as Justin Cunningham, an actor who happens to be Black. And I think there needs to be more of that just blanket all over, from the production side, camera ops, scripts, sound people, everybody. Like, it just needs to have a different tone of diversity everywhere. And I think that's where the best work is going to come from. And I think that we need to actively try to be making that happen across the board, whether it be theater or film and television.
Yeah, we do. We all have a role to play, don't we? And I love your point about behind the camera too, and who's making decisions. And we talk a lot about and work on issues of who's greenlighting projects, who's you said, sort of all of the above, top to
and
bottom.
I mean, it's not just about having the diversity there, but it's people that can offer a different perspective, because I think what it is the perspective has been in just one lane for so long that I think this perspective can shift a little bit and broaden, and it can reach more people. And if that's like a marketing thing to like get more people to see a product, the better for it. I mean, we saw that with Black Panther and things like that, and that it broadened and opened it up and said, like, here's a Black superhero, we can all be superheroes. And they probably made billions of dollars doing that. But it's important that we open everything up to get a wider view of what is possible and not what is safe.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, Hollywood's obviously done what they thought was safe, which was often not being inclusive and not being representative. And like you said, with things like Black Panther and the NWA project, just things over the last few years even that have, I think, woken up a lot of particularly white folks in power to say, like, oh, there's actually money here too. It's not just about doing the right thing. Yeah. It's interesting. Before we close, we have something we call our rapid fire question section. Justin, this is just sort of quick questions we like to ask to wrap things up. The first one we have for you was, if you have a favorite song to play the guitar to. I use some guitar skills and well, is there something that you go to?
Favorite song, Lenny by Stevie Ray Vaughan.
That's a good one, and covered really well a bunch of times too. Do you have a go-to routine to get ready for a role, or something you do before you get on stage?
Yes, I have to do either push-ups or sit-ups. I have to do something physical, something very physical.
Wow, interesting. Okay. And on that note, do you have a favorite sport or some physical activity that you go to maybe take a break or ease your mind a bit?
Boxing. I box every day.
Boxing. Okay.
Yeah.
I always want to do that. Let's see. And the last question: if you could travel back to when you were growing up, tell yourself one thing, maybe back in Arkansas when you were younger, what would you tell yourself, and why? Why would you tell yourself that thing?
I would say, trust it and go for it. Don't waste any time. And I think I tell myself that because I wasted 2 years trying to be a marketing, I don't know, but a business information systems major, and I hated it. And because I was letting people tell me what I should do, I should have backup for a fallback plan of what my life should be. And I always knew that I wanted to perform some way or give a piece of myself. And I tell myself, trust that and go for it.
Yeah, I love that. It's really difficult, isn't it, for young folks, especially sometimes, to just trust that voice. But you definitely have found your way. Again, I guess say Justin Cunningham. The new show is called Grand Crew. It's on Peacock. You should check it out. It's really great. Justin, it was a pleasure having you on, and best of luck with your next projects as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. Thank you for having me.